Hi dollies, welcome to another one of my BGD makeovers. Last time I showed you how I customized these two adorable kitties, including how to make custom BJD eyes. But what if your doll doesn't have holes for the eyes and just has a blank faceplate like this one? I can hand paint the eyes like I have done with previous dolls like these mermaids, but this blank face was included with the two original kitties as part of a commission, so I want all of their eyes to match, and it's really hard to get the same amount of detail by hand painting. Lucky for you, I have an easy way to get these beautiful eyes without having to paint every single detail, which would take forever. With the previous two kitties, I was able to get all this detail in their eyes because I drew them in Procreate, then printed them out on paper to make their eyes. As you can see, I already designed and printed out this kitty's green eyes on the same sheet. Before we use this artwork, we should first lay out the position and shape of the eyeliner on the blank head. I already sprayed it with a layer of Mr. Super Clear. On a blank face without any eye cutouts, it's difficult to make your eyes symmetrical, so here's an easy way to get perfectly symmetrical eye placement. Take a rubber band and put it around the head to use as a guide. I had to wrap it around the head twice because it was a bit too loose. You can move it up or down as needed. Now I'm starting to sketch the eyeliner with a watercolor pencil. I have my client-approved design printed out on the table in front of me to use as a reference. Now I'm sketching very lightly and it's a bit rough. I'm just trying to get the general size and placement of the eyes correct. I'll refine this later on. I made the eyes a little too high on the face, so I'm erasing and correcting the placement. I'm using the rubber bands method again to make sure her eyes are evenly spaced from the center of her face. I'm using a pink watercolor pencil to sketch her heart-shaped nose. I'll go over this with paint later. Now I'll use my super special precise eraser to clean up my lines. You can find this and all of the supplies that I use in my BJD supplies list, which is linked in the video description. So after all that, I still felt like the eyes were too high, so I erased it all and started over. Now I'm finally happy with one of the eyes, so let's try and draw the other one. I'm making a small mark where the bottom of her open eye should be, then removing the rubber band to finish drawing the line. Drawing the top eyeliner. Okay, now we can finally start using these eye designs. I cut one out and cut a little off the top and bottom. I placed it in the eye that I just drew, just to make sure it fits. This is what I call the ugly phase of the artwork, but just trust my process. I cleaned up my lines more, and now I'm comparing it to my previous kitty to make sure that they look similar. So far, so cute. Testing that eye placement one more time to make sure it looks okay. Okay, let's move on to drawing some of the smaller details. I'm using the rubber band again to help me draw the mouth in the center of the face. I'm using a light peach pencil to lightly sketch where her eyebrows will be. Then I'll save my work by spraying the face with Mr. Super Clear. Now let's start blushing the face. This part is always fun for me because it's like adding makeup. This is the same blush palette that I used for the previous two kitties. I'm just replenishing the colors with more chalk pastel. Scraping them into a powder allows me to blend the colors easily. I want to match this previous kitty, so I'll use the same color combinations. Starting with her ears, I'm blending a light peach color and applying it with a dry eyeshadow brush inside of her ears. I'm trying to avoid those pointy fur pieces. This is just the base color. Then I'm using a smaller eyeshadow brush with a darker pink color to shade around the edges of those pointy furs. You can use a soft kneaded eraser to erase any blush. You can blend out the part you just erased with your eyeshadow brush. I'm using light peach to shade in between her ears. using light peach for her eyeshadow on both eyes. If you want a natural look, you just need a little bit of eyeshadow. I'm using the same peach color for the sides of her cheeks. Now I'm using a cool pink for the center of her cheeks. Combining a warm and cool tone blush will give her a glowy natural look. It took a few layers to slowly build up the color intensity. It's best not to go too dark right away unless you want your doll to have clown cheeks. I prefer to build up the color slowly. I added some blush above her nose and around her eyebrows. Also a very light blushing on her forehead. I blended a light brown to shade the fur pieces at the sides of her face. I'm just getting around the fur and in between the pieces. Adding a little bit of peach to the tips of the fur. And just repeat on the other side. After this, I'll save my work with another layer of Mr. Super Clear. Now that I finished the blush, we can start painting the face. I'm using golden fluid acrylics with a number 4 round brush to paint the white of her eye. I use thin layers of paint to get a smooth finish. Here's how it looks after about 3 to 4 layers of white paint. Next, I'm going to attach the green eye that I printed and cut out. Using some Liquitex gloss varnish, I brushed a layer over the white part of the eye. This is going to act as a glue and sealant for the paper eye. You can also use Mod Podge instead of varnish. After shifting the eye into the correct position, I press it down to stick it onto the head. Then I brush another layer over the paper. This part is really important to seal and protect your paper artwork. I'm going past the edges of the paper around the eye. Here's how it looks after the varnish dried. I know there's some white space showing between the top of the paper eye and the eyeliner, but if you keep watching, I'll show you how I fix that. To paint the eyeliner, I'm using the same burnt sienna brown color as the previous kitties. Using my number 4 brush again, I find that starting the paint in the middle of the eyeliner is easier than starting in the corners. After I finish the base coat, I use a smaller number 2 brush for the second layer and to refine the edges and corners. Finish the winking eye. Before painting the eyeliner of the left eye, let's fix the gap at the top of her iris with some green paint. That looks much better. Now let's paint the eyeliner. Okay, things are starting to come together. Let's paint the small details. I'm using this super thin liner brush to paint the line for her eyelid. I'm nervous because it's hard to get these right on the first try. Notice that I'm resting my pinky on the side of her face. If your hands are shaky, this is a good way to steady yourself while painting tiny details. And yes, I got it right on the first try. I'll use this brush to finish the lines for her eyelids and mouth. I'm adding some white highlight at the top of her eyelid to bring them out more. To make her eyelids look more three-dimensional, I'm using watered-down layers of white paint to highlight the center of the lids. This will gradually make the eyelids lighter in the center. You can see that her eyelids don't look so flat anymore. Let's finish painting the details around her eyes. I used a watercolor pencil to sketch some of her eyelashes before going over them with paint. I left these fur details at the sides of her eyes just as pencil because I wanted them to remain soft and not compete with the eyes. Next, I added some green iridescence to her open eye for some subtle sparkle. I'm painting the eyebrows with a mix of white and titanium buff. This makes a pale almond color. Because I blush the area around her eyebrows first, the pale color will stand out. Sketching her whiskers with a white watercolor pencil. To help her whiskers stand out more, I'm adding a light brown shadow underneath the white lines. Adding white paint over the whiskers. To make the eyes look more luminous and sparkly, I used a light green pencil to highlight the center of her eyeliner. It doesn't show very well at the moment, but I'll add more layers later. I'm adding blue shadows in the white part of the eye to make it look more three-dimensional. This next part really helps hide the edge of the paper eye. Using a black watercolor pencil, I'm shading the bottom of the eyeliner, concentrating on where it meets the paper. This not only hides the edge of the paper, it creates more depth in the eye artwork. And now I'm going to save my work with another layer of Mr. Super Clear. Adding some more green pencil to the eyeliner before painting some light green eyelash details. I love painting eyelashes. They might be my favorite part of doing face-ups. Almost done! To make perfectly round highlights, I use this ball-ended stylus. I just dip the end in paint and apply it to the face. Ready to meet this new kitty? Here she is, next to one of her sisters. I think the printed eye artwork turned out really nice. You can't even tell that it's made of paper. If you want to add a lot of small detail into your eyes, this is a great way to do it. What do you think of my custom kitties? If you want to commission a custom doll for me, you can reach out to me on Instagram or send me an email. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like. I have more BGD makeover videos in my playlist linked below. Thanks for watching, dollies, and see you next time.